Hey guys, what is going on? My name is Tom Spark. Welcome back to another video. I'm making an official visual representation of the VPN tier list. Just like every other video for this current period, my current sponsors of this video are TorGuard and Surfshark. I'll be putting links for them in the description down below. If you want to check out TorGuard, I recommend their core VPN package, which is extremely affordable. And if you want to check out Surfshark, I recommend their package that includes Incogni, since it's a very good value that includes one of the best data broker remover services. But just keep in mind, guys, these sponsors do not impact the ratings here on the channel, and you'll see my objective verifiable data being presented very clearly in this video. I just have to mention these sponsors since they do help the channel going and help me make videos just like this one without taking your guys' direct money through Patreon or any other means, which is a waste of money in my opinion. So guys, let's get back to the video. Now, you might see other VPN tier lists here on YouTube, but just to be clear, I was the first one to make one like this. In fact, I do own the domain, and the central hub of my channel is vpntierlist.com, where I've rated pretty much every VPN with objective verifiable data, which you can find in this massive 600 square table that really no one really can compete with this amount of data collection I've done on all these different VPNs. I've rated them all differently by tiers here on my website. If you want to check that out, go check it out, or maybe even take the VPN quiz. So unlike these other cronies who will make these tier lists maybe of 10 VPNs or something like that, someone like Techlore, he puts them in there. He didn't even review it or rate. He hasn't done VPN reviews for a while. And pretty much all the other tier lists are just channels that want to promote Nord and probably have some kind of they're just not real channels in my opinion. So today we're going to be doing a tier list. Techlore's had half of these, but today ours we've added around like 10 or so, because just to be clear, we've rated and tested every single one of these VPN providers. You can find videos for any of these VPNs with proof of my use in review of these VPN providers. So in traditional fashion, let's go ahead and start the tier list. Now, just to be clear, this video is not really my opinion. This is just taking my objective, verifiable data and putting it in the tier list system. I'm not just putting these wherever I want because I have some personal vendetta against them. This is simply where the data lies. All right, guys. So first up is going to be a VPN called Adguard VPN, and it is kind of hidden by my little setup here, but Adguard VPN is going to be pretty much kind of down in C tier. It's not a B tier VPN, it's really a C tier VPN provider. It's just not really good in a lot of ways. Why is that? Well, it doesn't have very good customer support. There's no live chat on the website. In terms of its privacy audit, it's missing things like transparent leadership. I don't think it's had a no-log audit even, and the feature set is just kind of lackluster. I don't believe it has Fire Stick support. It doesn't have WireGuard, which is pretty bad, at least in my last tests. And it's also missing things like port forwarding, remote VPN capability, and all sorts of bundled deal offerings that other VPNs do have. Additionally, it is also missing good speeds. The VPN is just simply pretty slow, so that's definitely not good. Outside of that, though, it is pretty expensive too. So overall, it's just a C tier VPN provider. I honestly think their DNS offerings are better. All right, guys, so next up we have AirVPN. Now, AirVPN is another VPN that gets more praise than I think it really deserves. AirVPN is a decent VPN in terms of privacy, but on all other fronts, it kind of fails. It doesn't even have an iOS application. The speeds aren't very amazing. The application looks like it was made in Windows 98, and it kind of feels and functions that way too. It's got port forwarding, it's cheap, and it's pretty transparent, which is good to have in a VPN. But just because you have those things doesn't mean you have a good VPN service to use, and that's unfortunately the case with AirVPN. In fact, there's been numerous years where I've had so many bugs and errors with AirVPN that it makes reviewing it actually a pain in the ass. I would say probably out of all these VPNs, it's probably the VPN I hate reviewing the most, just because it's so annoying to actually use. So next up, guys, we got AzireVPN. Now, AzireVPN is one of those VPNs that kind of has its hallmark fame in that it owns its servers and things like that. But again, in all other aspects, it's kind of a weak VPN. It's not especially cheap. It's not especially feature packed. In fact, it has a very, very limited application. It's missing tons of things: kill switches, split tunneling, browser extensions, ad blocking, all sorts of things. It's not particularly fast. It doesn't support very many countries. It doesn't have 2FA. It doesn't even have live chat. And yeah, it's just not a very good and complete VPN provider. Really, their only claim to fame is that they own their own servers, which I guess if you're okay with slow speeds, is worth it, I guess. It's not really worth it. So C tier. Next up, we have Cyberghost. Now, ironically, all these VPNs being placed here are in C tier, and Cyberghost is no exception. Cyberghost is a VPN provider that used to be one of the biggest ones, but it's kind of lost a lot of market share to Nord, I think, recently. It's just one of those big VPN providers that has too many trackers. The applications haven't been updated too much. It's kind of stagnated. It's just not as big of a VPN in most ways, and it just kind of can't really compete with the other VPNs. It's not especially transparent. It doesn't have any special use cases or any special compatibility. The speeds aren't very good well, actually the speeds were pretty good. The speeds were good according to my last test. However, the privacy, like I said, is nothing special. The pricing isn't anything special. It's pretty expensive, and its streaming compatibility, working with stuff like Netflix and those kind of things, wasn't really that good, and not as good as the other big VPN providers. Next up, we have ExpressVPN. Now, ExpressVPN does compete a little bit better than Cyberghost, and I think people like TechLore who lumped them all together, it's a mistake, because while they are kind of owned by the same company, the products do have differentiating factors. ExpressVPN is faster, it works better with streaming. It is still expensive. The privacy practices aren't the best. It has trackers and so forth on the website. It does have a couple cool, interesting features within the application, like not interfering with LAN devices, which I do like. Outside of that, though, it's one of those VPNs that's kind of been stagnated, and it hasn't really had any meaningful updates for a number of years, and it's kind of lost its market share and ground to other VPNs that have done more. Now, Ipvanish, I would say, is actually more similar to something like Cyberghost. However, I would say it's probably even worse. It kind of feels like it's left behind even more. It used to be one of the biggest VPNs. It's transferred hands multiple times. And overall, it's just kind of gotten worse and worse over the years, as it feels largely like a product that's kind of been abandoned. Interestingly enough, it did have one of the first VPNs to have an Apple TV app. I don't know why that was or where that came from, but the features are just kind of lacking. It's lacking stuff like split tunneling, Linux GUI, ad blocking, DNS controls, port forwarding, all the common things. It's also kind of expensive, and I don't necessarily trust the company behind it, which is J2 Global. It's a company that owns a lot of different brands, including stuff like SaferVPN and stuff like IGN and those kind of websites, as well as speedtest.net, which is kind of interesting. One little interesting tidbit here is that for some reason, Ipvanish used to be very associated with like Kodi blogs. Websites that would promote Kodi also promoted Ipvanish. I'm not sure exactly why, if they had some kind of deal or created these websites, but it's kind of an interesting factoid for you. iVPN is a VPN that gets shilled a lot by a certain privacy-centered audience, people who value VPNs only for privacy and act like they don't do anything else, like unblock geo restrictions or have any other use cases. iVPN does very, very well on the privacy front. The only thing it's missing is a clear precedent of not giving away logs to a court case. It's never done that. Otherwise, it's perfect in terms of privacy. However, despite what the shills will tell you, it's not a perfect VPN provider. It doesn't have any live chat offering. It doesn't respond well to criticism, the company itself. If you criticize them in a review and you say it's not the best and most perfect VPN, likely they'll come after you and flame you like they did me. Outside of that, though, stream compatibility is piss poor. It doesn't work with any of the major services, so you're not going to be able to use it as a VPN to unblock geo restrictions. Additionally, it's also one of the most expensive VPN providers. Outside of that, though, it's also missing a couple things. Fire Stick support doesn't have browser extensions for some reason in 2024, which is odd. It doesn't have port forwarding anymore, which means it's not ideal for torrenting. It also doesn't have dedicated IP support, which is kind of annoying. No remote VPN capability, no interesting bundles, and it doesn't support more than 50 plus countries, which is kind of our benchmark for getting the most optimal speeds. That said, it is good in terms of privacy, but in every other area, whether price, streaming, or anything like that, it's lacking. So its score is a 41 on my tier list, which actually does make it a D tier VPN. Yikes. No wonder they don't like my channel. However, that said, if iVPN actually wanted to make a better received product, especially on my rating table. They certainly could do so. They would get around 10 plus points for streaming compatibility if they fix that, and they definitely could. Other VPNs have figured it out. They added live chat, they could get another 5. If they lowered the pricing, they'd probably get another 5 points. That'd give them like 20 more points, which would actually put them right going into A tier / the top of B tier, which would make it a recommendation from me. However, they don't seem like a company interested in improving their product. Instead, they'd rather write blog posts about how you don't need a VPN, or pretty much just mimicking stuff that TechLore says for one reason or another, even though he knows nothing about VPNs. Now, Mullvad VPN, this one's interesting because in a lot of ways, I think it just does exactly what iVPN does, but completely better. It has the same kind of core fundamental privacy principles. It's also missing the other features like stream compatibility and some other things like that, or port forwarding either anymore. But instead of being expensive like iVPN is, it's cheaper. So it just gets a higher score. Next up, we have NordVPN. Now, NordVPN is the first S-tier rated VPN here on this list. Now, NordVPN, if you asked me 4 or 5 years ago if I would rate it this high, I would say hell no. However, since then, it's actually become quite a good VPN in a number of ways. Is it perfect? By all means, no way. It still has too many trackers. It still could be more transparent. And I still think it could interact with its community a little bit more. It's a little bit corporate in my opinion. However, the amount of money inflowing into this product has made it pretty good. It has very, very good speeds. One of the biggest server networks. The application's been updated numerous times to be very intuitive and easy to use for almost anybody. It has interesting mesh networking features, which are free. Outside of that, you can get some interesting bundled offerings if you want a password manager or some of those different things like drive support. The good thing about Nord, though, the customer support is pretty good as well. And it's also expanded its feature set quite a bit over the years. Take, for example, the fact that it has an open source Linux application, has dedicated IP support, SOCKS 5 proxy support, DNS controls, WireGuard, ad blocking, all the things you really need. And it even has kind of threat removals, kind of like a malware blocker. 2FA is on the website. Like I said, really, it just needs to improve its transparency and privacy, and it could be a little bit cheaper and kind of be a little bit more friendly with canceling the product itself as a subscription product, and it would be even better. Are they going to do those things? Well, no, but at least they've done their own thing and managed to get the S tier just by being good in almost every other aspect. So good job, Nord. Now we have a VPN called Perfect Privacy, and no one really ever talks about this one. I feel like this is one of those VPNs I've reviewed probably the least on my channel. I don't even think it's actually currently rated in my current incarnation of the tier list. It's just that hard to kind of find anything people talking about it or updates regarding the product. I don't think it's really updated very often. But like I've said, I've reviewed almost every VPN on this channel, or pretty much every VPN. And according to my last scores, we could go ahead and see what I thought of it. So as I said, we are the first rated one. We did a review 5 years ago and 4 years ago, and it looks like I haven't done one since. Let's go ahead and see what my conclusion was. Nice hair, Tom. So around this time, I gave it a 3.67, which is kind of like an average rating, which would equate to around, in the current modern day, I would say probably something like a B tier. And that kind of lines up to what I would kind of rate it now, just off the top of my head, even though I haven't tested it for quite some time, and I doubt it's really received many updates. Next up, though, guys, we have private internet access, and this is another pretty solid VPN. I'm going to be... Well, actually, we need to kind of change this table because we actually don't have an S tier on my... my chart. Is actually, the top is A tier. We don't have an S tier. So let's go ahead and delete that, and that will fix that. And we'll put Nord here. So private internet access is actually going to be A tier VPN. Why does it get that? Well, it's pretty cheap. The streaming works well. The application is very good. The customer support's not bad. It all around does everything pretty good. What is bad about it? Well, it did get sold to Cape. The company could be more transparent. They did lay off a lot of employees. So it's not the VPN I trust the most, but it still gets the points to be an A-tier VPN provider. Next up is a VPN called ProtonVPN. Now, this VPN has steadily climbed my rankings for quite some time. It's open source and very transparent. Now, that doesn't mean anything necessarily if you can't do other things good, like have no trackers on your website and stuff like that. Like if you have no log audit, but you still have trackers on your website, it doesn't really mean much to me, but Proton does manage to do a lot of those things right while maintaining a very good application that other VPNs like Mullvad and iVPN can't do. For example, it works really well with streaming, it's feature rich, it's relatively affordable, and it has a huge server network. These are all things that Mullvad and iVPN don't have and Proton does. So that's how it's climbed its way to the top of the table. Now we have something like RiseUpVPN, and for some reason TechLord thought this would be a good idea to put on the top scores of his thing. But if you watch my review and video on it, it doesn't really even work on Windows. So D tier for me. I connected, but no website would actually work. Next up on the channel, we have Surfshark. This one's going to be right behind Nord, and unsurprisingly, they're very similar products. They're owned by the same company. The difference between Nord and Surfshark is they just kind of have different bundled offerings. Surfshark is actually a little bit cheaper than Nord, and in most cases I think it might be a little better for buy. Nord has a couple other like little nitpicky things that Surfshark doesn't have, like a SOCKS 5 proxy and a open source Linux application. But besides that, they are very, very similar. And I would really only recommend Surfshark to people if they're interested in getting Incogni, which is actually one of the best bundled deals for including a data broker, although you can also kind of add it on with Nord. So there really isn't too much difference there. Surfshark is a sponsor of the channel, so I did want to mention that, although it does not influence the rankings, despite what people will tell you. Next up, we have TorGuard. Now, TorGuard is going to be right behind Proton and a very solid VPN at that. People don't really talk about TorGuard, and you might be wondering why. Well, its commission model is relatively low compared to a lot of VPNs, especially compared to something like Nord and Surfshark, which pay a lot more, or even something like Private Internet Access and Proton pay even more. TorGuard pays the least out of almost all these VPN providers, and that is why no one really likes to talk about TorGuard, despite the fact it's an excellent product. It's very cheap, it's feature rich, it's extremely fast, probably the fastest VPN I've tested. Its privacy audit is nearly spotless. The only thing they don't have is open source applications and a no-log audit. They nail everything else, whether that means transparent leadership, never being sold, no data leaks really that are ever concerning. There was some issue that people love to mention where TorGuard had some servers compromised, but unlike the other VPNs at the time, it didn't store its private key on that server, so no information was able to be viewed or unencrypted, which is not what happened with NordVPN and other VPNs later on like Windscribe. So they do know how to do their security there, which is very impressive, and honestly that makes me trust them even more. Not only that, but besides oVPN, they're one of the only VPNs that are court proven not to collect logs because they went to court and refused to give up logs, settling instead to block US torrent traffic. However, sometime later, whether that be a year or just months later, it seemed to not really be an issue anymore. Of course, they didn't make any official blog posts or anything like that, but the TorGuard community kind of understood that this wasn't going to be an issue anymore, and anyone who uses TorGuard never complains about this being an issue. The only people who complain about it being an issue are people who don't want you to use TorGuard for whatever reason they have, and they'll say, oh, don't use TorGuard, it's blocked on US torrent servers. But I've made video proof here on this channel showing that it does work still, and at some point it just started working again. And if you know how to use qBittorrent and you know the anonymous mode feature, it never was an issue in the first place. Next up, we have something like Tunnelbear. Now, Tunnelbear VPN is a VPN that every once in a while I'll see it kind of pop up somewhere. It's relatively unknown now, though. It doesn't really have much market share. It's not even really currently rated in my table just because no one really talks about it. But I've done a couple reviews on it. And one weird reason I popped up again is it has an Apple TV app for some reason. Next up, we have VyprVPN. Now, VyprVPN is a VPN that is okay. It's actually a B-tier VPN with a good-looking application, decent speeds, and overall decent product. It is a bit expensive, and unfortunately, it just isn't quite updated anymore. One of the guys actually joined my Discord like 5 or 6 years ago, and he was pretty friendly and kind of gave me a cool vibe with the company. I actually liked them quite a lot back then, but since then, they haven't really put out any updates, talked to me, or really seem to be working on the VPN that much. It's still a decent VPN, but nothing special in my opinion. Next up, we have Windscribe, and I'll rate them very fairly in this video just because this is a tier list and we're not taking any considerations of what happens on VPN tier list. This is just a visual tier list. Windscribe is top of the line of B tier. They're a pretty good VPN provider. It's only unfortunate that I think the teams toxicity and gatekeeping kind of hold it back as a product. I used to be an affiliate for them, and they decided that they didn't like how they weren't rated #1 on any website, so they decided to just burn down their entire program altogether. Despite the fact they could have climbed their way up just like Proton or any of these other VPNs over the years if they actually improved their product instead of just burning any relationship they had formerly made to their ground. But if you go inside their community, you'll find probably 20 or 30 pages of people being obsessed with me, shit talking me, as well as other creators. I live rent-free in their head, which is, I guess, good. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me if they decided to end their affiliate program. They were not at the time a top tier VPN. They still are not, in my opinion. They've had some security issues, whether that be leaking IPs on Chrome or having their servers seized and not being encrypted, or just the general vibe of the place is not my personal favorite. You'll see people complaining about customer support and things like that. But admittedly, the graphical user interface of the application is excellent. Speeds are good. Pricing is fair. It's just not a VPN I talk about a lot on my channel because the audience there in the Discord is like, if you threw me into a gymnasium of 12th graders that were infected by the zombie plague, that's what it feels like jumping into their server if you don't like Windscribe. But if you do, you know, it's great. It's so great. Next up, we have AvastVPN. Now, this is a VPN that's going to be in D tier. My voice is starting to go out, so I'm going to be short with some of these ones that don't deserve much limelight. It's basically just a rebranded kind of VPN product without many features that is just offered by an antivirus because they want to make more money. BraveVPN is pretty much just a mobile VPN that they decided to make into a VPN service to push and monetize their product, which is now installed on your computer if you have Brave, whether you like it or not, which is annoying, but it sucks. And AtlasVPN, another VPN owned by the Nord conglomerate. Unfortunately, it's just not as good as Nord and Surfshark. It doesn't have as many features. They've tried to improve the features over the years, but it still just doesn't really compete, in my opinion, and my verifiable data on the chart. You'll see on the chart if you want why exactly. oVPN, a very trustworthy VPN provider, but unfortunately one that has not done well in my tier list. It's kind of feature lacking. The transparency is kind of lacking now because it sold out its company. It used to be very trustworthy in my opinion, but it did kind of start lacking in terms of budget and stuff like that in development. The last time I tested it, I don't think it had WireGuard, and it just overall was very slow and kind of glitchy. PureVPN, VPN that is okay. It's kind of like Cyberghost and some of these other VPNs that have had enough money that they made somewhat of a good product, but generally the reputation and stuff like that holds me back from recommending it. PureVPN also emails me like once a month trying to get me to promote them on the channel, which I will not do, especially because I have found that they will be very malignant in how they do Google AdWords. For example, you look up Surfshark dedicated IP and they'll have an ad saying PureVPN dedicated IP, or they'll have Surfshark dedicated IP, but the link will actually go to PureVPN's website. I'm pretty sure this is infringing kind of like trademark or something like that, or kind of just bad practice overall, and it's definitely kind of shady. CactusVPN is a VPN I used to really like. It had a very fair pricing model, fair speeds, it had WireGuard, and the application was decent. It looked a little clunky and the website was a little outdated, but I really liked the team behind it. I think they're based in like Romania or something like that. But the team just kind of stopped updating their VPN, and I haven't really heard from them for a number of years, but I used to like them. PrivateVPN, similar to Cactus, actually, another VPN, kind of like oVPN, which had a pretty cool guy behind it. I think his name was Martin. I used to be in contact with him back in the day. Right now on my tier list, it's rated at 58.5, which would make it the top of C tier. So we're going to put it right here. Next up, we have iVacy, and this is just going to go right alongside PureVPN because it's pretty much the same product, kind of like Surfshark and Nord. Hi.me is a VPN you won't see mentioned very often because it is another VPN that doesn't pay a ton, but it's actually a pretty good product. Now, I don't recommend it here on the channel all the time because the speeds just aren't really good for me in the United States, but they're pretty fine outside of the United States. I think the application is looking better and better lately. They've been updating it. It's a pretty decent product. I don't think it quite has like as many check marks as something like Proton. It doesn't look quite as good, and it's a little clunkier to use. And the website, the SOX5 proxy, is a little buggy in my experience. However, that said, compared to all these other options outside of TorGuard, it is very affordable. So that is good to see. PersonalVPN is a VPN I tested recently. The guy actually reached out to me, and it was someone who had been developing kind of other kind of software for VPN and having kind of more focus on the business VPN market. I tested out his VPN. It was okay. I did a full review on the channel if you want more. All right, guys, this is my final results of the tier list. I didn't have to move anything around because it's not my opinion. This was all done with verifiable data, which you can find on vpntierlist.com. Let me know if you like this tier list. Let me know if you disagree with anything in the comments down below. Let me know why this tier list is better than TechLores, and also let me know why this tier list is better than all the other shills on YouTube. But anyways, guys, thanks for checking out this one. I'll be putting links down below for my A-tier VPN providers. If you want to check out any of them, it'll help support the channel and help objective reviews just like this one.